Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are in this world. Welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. My name is Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm the moderator for today's event, and thank you very much for joining us. We have a great webinar on tap today with two really cool speakers. But before we get started, I would like to just go over a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, today's webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to access this webinar probably about 24 hours or so after today's event, and it will be available on the DevOps.com website. Also, we will be taking questions from the audience throughout today's webinar, which we'll be asking our speakers near the end of the webinar today. So if you have a question at any time for either of our speakers, please feel free to submit your question using the control panel that's on your screen. Okay, with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's speaker for our webinar, the title of which, by the way, is EMA, Priorities for Hybrid Cloud, Containers, and DevOps. Our first speaker today is Torsten Volk, who is Managing Research Director at EMA. And then our other speaker is Anand Ahire, who is General Manager for ElectricFlow. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi there. Good to be here.
Great. So, Torsten, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you guys do your magic.
Thank you. Anand, if you could fast forward to the first slide, please. So this is what it's all about, right? This is why we are all here. We need to become digital attackers, and that is becoming a term more and more in the industry. A digital attacker, right? We always joke about you need to turn your shoe store into a digital attacker. But what this really means is we need to deliver faster and better to our customers. We need to have room to be disruptive, right? We need to try out new things, test them. If they work, fantastic. Implement them. If they don't, everybody makes mistakes. We move on. And of course, we need to do this all at the same or at a lower budget without hiring a whole football team worth of people. So today, end users are inspecting this interactive experience, and even for the most basic tasks, right? They're running a boring errand, and they expect something special in terms of their user experience. They expect an augmented reality app. They expect an iPad to be present everywhere you are, and everything is really about the end user and the end user experience. And of course, you need to be able to measure that experience and its business impact to see if everything that you are doing, everything that we believe we know about the end users actually is true and translates in additional revenue. So that's the high-level outline of what we need to do. So, Anand, if you go to the next slide, we'll see the homework that a lot of us need to complete before we get to the stage of digital attacker. The EMA research report that was quoted in the beginning really shows that there are three key gaps in most enterprises. The first one is IT silos, automation silos, right? Things are automated by script. They're all separated, storage, network, compute, virtualization, the NOC, everything is a separate entity. And it's very difficult or impossible to automate effectively across those silos. Next point, cost analytics. We have more and more possibilities of deploying our application to the data center and to the cloud. And even in the cloud, we have infrastructure as a service, we have containers as a service, we have even serverless functions. We have so many different options that we need something that tells us, hey, here's your workload, here's what it needs in terms of compliance, in terms of performance, cost, all of those factors. And then we can make a rational decision between cost and risk and say, yes, this is a VIP application, this goes to a dedicated server, or it goes to something more premium. And in other cases, the risk may be acceptable, right? So that's number 2. And number 3 is decentralized pane of glass. And that goes back to number 1, the automation, but it's the other end of the story. We need a centralized monitoring and management system and platform so that we can tell how healthy our IT is in relation to our business goals, right? It's always tying IT to the business goals. So based on these 3 key pain points for most enterprise customers today, almost all enterprise customers show these pain points in different in different strengths. The EMA research project that was shown on the title page, it was an empirical research project where we asked 260 enterprises in the US about their priorities, their key pain points. So basically your peers were telling us, okay, here's what we need to do next, right? And all of those things, all those investment priorities are addressing these 3 key pain points. Anand, if you go to the next slide, please. So here they are, big drum roll, right? It's almost like a checklist of things to take care of before you can turn into a true digital attacker and use IT as a differentiation. And each one of those makes you faster, it makes you more compliant, it makes you more cost effective. And therefore it makes you get closer to the marketplace, right? So what we have here is, of course, cost, security, compliance, but also specific things that are more tools like a container management that needs to be integrated into our corporate IT instead of kept separate. The private cloud is coming back. We'll talk about that shortly. We need this integration between external and internal systems. And the hyper-converged marketplace, speaking of integration, is also heating up, and we need to evaluate how we incorporate hyper-converged infrastructure into our strategies. So all of those are points that your peers are currently looking at, and basically the most significant investment priorities right now. Anand, are there any surprises on this sheet, in this orange box for you?
Hey, hi Torsten, hello everyone. Before I begin, let me just start by saying we are extremely happy and honored, frankly, to be named in the top 3 products in this research that you are doing around hybrid cloud, containers, and DevOps. And frankly, there are no real surprises. In fact, this is just providing yet another evidence for what we have heard over the past decade of working with various companies, right? Now, when we are working with these companies to deliver their software faster, we have seen very similar business drivers as you have mentioned, right? In this day and age of consumerization, as you rightly pointed out, every business has become a software business, and we firmly believe that based on your ability to deliver value faster, you're either out-innovating your competition or losing market share, right? So yes, Torsten, in the software-driven economy, companies of different shapes and sizes and in different verticals, really, all are frankly looking for improved speed and quality of delivery to market, reducing their cost and improving operational efficiencies, really removing all of the manual tasks, error-prone manual tasks, bringing as much automation. So I wouldn't say there are really no real surprises around the business drivers as well as the priorities that you shared. And those are really exactly the types of conversations that we have with our prospects and customers, and the problems that we have been solving for a while now, even before some of these terms became big, like DevOps and ARA and CD. Those exactly were the conversations that we were having. It's just that they have got the resonance now. And some of those conversations we've been helping customers based on our DevOps Release Automation solution named ElectricFlow. And ElectricFlow is a unified platform that allows teams of different sizes to automate deployments and coordinate releases everywhere, and it does that for application of any architecture, right? So, I mean, frankly, there are no real surprises because, having worked with so many enterprises in this space and talking about our customers, most of them are transforming their businesses by acting on the many of the important priorities that you talked about. And what really excites me about all of this is while it is gaining momentum, most of these names that I'm showing and the conversations that we are having these days, and even our DevOps Enterprise Summit that we host, really most of these names are our household names that all of us have known for decades, and not just the recent unicorns that get associated when people think about continuous delivery, right? But these are the companies that have really, from the traditional sense, transformed their world. And what we also see here is there is a good mix of companies across different verticals, right from the telecom to aerospace and defense to really ISVs and fin sector, obviously, right? So, yeah, and frankly, as we look at it, most of it really started with embarking. Most of these really started with embarking on their DevOps automation journey, and as that tended to be their first thing. It looks like that is the first key priority that you also found in your research, right, Torsten?
Right. I mean, the interesting piece is every time somebody says to me on the plane or somewhere else casually when you have a conversation about what you're talking about in terms of quick releases and every company becoming to some degree a software company, you sit next to a nonprofit guy or you sit next to an interesting vertical that you wouldn't necessarily at first glance expect to depend on software that much. And people say, oh yeah, for us this is not valid. We don't have the time. We don't have the resources. We just have 20 host servers, and make the argument, no, we do not need to become a digital attacker. So maybe the term digital attacker is a little bit unfortunate in that regard, but what it really means is that software is at the core of everybody's that's how you communicate to your staff, to the customers, to everybody on the outside, how the company is perceived. So the ability to quickly release 3-4 features every week or every 2 weeks is absolutely critical. And what we see here on this slide, based on our research of those 260 enterprises, is that there are big gaps. You see those to the right. They are caused by this lack of automation and centralized monitoring. And those points have one thing in common. They're all about speed, compliance, and quality. And when you look at those key pain points to the left, you see that those are all caused by a lack of automation, right? You see this point of issue prioritization. That goes back to the silos that I was talking about. If you have silos in your DevOps process, in your data center, in your cloud, then it is impossible to automate your process and to align your process, your DevOps process, with business goals. So here are really the big drivers of this wave of automation and monitoring and integration products that we need to see inside, that we need for the DevOps process, Anand. And I assume Electric Cloud can help tie together those silos and really provide me with some metrics that show me where my release is and how worried I have to be when I think about my business tomorrow, and in relation to where my software stands today.
Absolutely, Torsten. This is our wheelhouse for a while. Like I said before, even before these terms became the marquee terms of today, DevOps, continuous delivery, and ARA, application release automation, we've been really helping customers break those silos. And when we talk to customers, right, where it's not that customers don't have, or companies don't have automation. There is automation, but more often than not, we end up finding it's in silos, right? The islands of automation. And I would love to talk more about our product, how we really solve that, because this is really has been the thing that we've been doing for 10 years. What I was hoping is maybe this would be a great time to do a quick poll just to get a feel for where everyone on this call is in their journey around DevOps automation adoption. So maybe
that's a great idea. We happen to have such a poll, and I'm just pushed out to the audience now. So it is audience participation time. This is the first of 2 polls that we'll be asking during the webinar. The first one here is on your screen now. It's what is your timing for DevOps? So go ahead and select one of the following, either already doing it, 0 to 6 months, 7 to 12 months, or 13 plus months. We'll give you guys a few seconds to go ahead and submit your answer, and then we'll take a look at the results. Okay. All right, about 5 more seconds here, and then we'll go ahead and close it out. All right. Okay, poll is closed. Let's take a look at, we're going to take a look at the results real quick. And let's see. All right, we've got about 50% who are already doing DevOps, which is kind of interesting. Another 21% are chomping at the bit to do it within the next 6 months. So, Anand, are you guys actually seeing that out in the marketplace? Does that kind of align with what you're seeing?
And I mean, thanks for that, Charlene. Yes, this, frankly, the whole idea around getting a software delivery process under control and moving to more automation, that has been a journey that, frankly, really began with the Agile moment. And if you think about the Agile manifesto, it really was about delivering value to the customers faster. And while it started with CI, we do see a lot of desire on moving to automation. But when, like I said before, more often than not, when we dig deeper around, okay, you have automation, let's look at what automation do you have. Do you have the capability of being able to have a small sample sizes move all the way closer to the production automated way? What we end up finding is there is automation that is in silos, and that's really where products like ElectricFlow come into play. To Torsten's comment earlier, right? I mentioned earlier about customers realizing the value of DevOps automation, and that really is mainly based on our ElectricFlow product, which is our DevOps Release Automation solution. And it's an enterprise-grade platform that simplifies provisioning, build, and release of multi-tier application. It's, frankly, in our opinion, really the only end-to-end DevOps solution based on an unified platform that allows to handle the entire path to production of applications of any architecture, right from a developer check-in all the way to the production deployments, right? It's also consistently rated as a leader by various analyst evaluations, and of course we are stoked to be in top 3 in even EMA's evaluation. And just to take a quick closer look, under the covers, ElectricFlow has this proven enterprise-grade automation platform that's highly scalable, secure, and really on top of that, using our integration layer and lots of our plugins, we have built a kind of a domain-specific layer that goes across different use cases and helps customers really cater to scenarios such as deploying applications predictably across different environments using our model-driven philosophy. But today I don't really want to get into the details of all the product talk, just to give you a very high level, right? Other use cases that we get into is automating the end-to-end software delivery of software delivery pipelines for one or many applications across various stages with proper approvals, really bringing the automation with governance, orchestrating the entire DevOps tool chain using our hundreds of out-of-the-box plugins. And it is, of course, it's not just about automation. It's really about many built-in capabilities that are important when you're handling this at scale in an enterprise. Things such as automated rollbacks, deployment strategies like rolling deployments, blue-green canary for zero downtime, visibility to Torsten's point of knowing exactly what is deployed where, and many, many, many more, right? And while that is all about automation, you did talk about metrics, and we will probably get into a lot of details a little later on this. On top of all of that, there is this DevOps Insight layer that we have recently announced. In fact, that was announced just earlier few weeks back, that allows to join the dots between the bottom-up automation and top-down business metrics. Now, all great product stuff, but really, while it's a full functional platform, depending on the size and scope of the projects and different companies, what we realize is that they start their journeys with different use cases. But what remains constant, Torsten, is the need for flexibility as well as security. And looks like that is also one of the key priorities that you're noticing with respect to your research, right, around security and compliance?
Yeah, and you see those 50% in the survey we just did. They're not surprising in that it's a sliding scale, right? DevOps is not there DevOps is not there one day. It's a process. It's a cultural shift mainly to get to this agile way of thinking, to this incorporation of compliance and security in your release process through more and more automation and through embedding more and more roles like the compliance officers and the security guys into this release process, right? So I'm sure a lot of participants have done DevOps and say they have done DevOps, but they don't have that degree of governance and automation. And this also is reflected on this chart here, which is about security and compliance specifically. And whenever you have a lack of automation, and you have so many layers, you showed this slide with all the different tools that you include in this DevOps process, and nobody wants to give up their tool, right? That makes them more productive and that they've been using for many years. They don't want to give those up. So you need something that really ties everything together and gives insight and makes security part of this whole process. So you see that 70% of organizations said that they are driven by one or more compliance standards. And you can see the key compliance standards here: HIPAA, PCI, SOX, ITIL. So compliance plays still a large role. ITIL is at the bottom of this list, and you know, for various reasons. But HIPAA, 37% of enterprises, right? They're not health insurances or health-related enterprises. They are across the board. They are basically the kind of enterprises that Anand showed on his slide a little while ago. So, but they have some touch points with HIPAA, and you also see that almost 60% pick their cloud technologies based on security consideration. Meaning, if security is not a part of your cloud or of your cloud-related tool, like a DevOps tool, a container tool, if the security guys do not agree with those tools, in 60% of the cases, it's game over, because that is a key decision criteria. And then security and compliance, they're part of they should be in the DNA of a DevOps automation tool, right? Can you talk about that for your software?
Yeah, Torsten, I mean, okay, Windows wants me to do the security, right? Updates are important for security. But Torsten, this is always very close to my heart, because you know, to a certain extent, we're talking about moving fast and automating everything, continuous delivery, continuous deployments. You know, sometimes that scares some of the audit and compliance-heavy processes. And really, if you think about it, some of these physically are at odds with each other, right? The desire to move fast and the security, compliance, and risk mitigation to a certain extent are at odds. And that's really where technologies like ElectricFlow come into picture. Just because you want to move fast doesn't mean you want to sacrifice your compliance and your regulatory things that have made you a successful enterprise, right? You never want to be, and if you're a bank, your FinServ or your government in different industries, they have their own regulations, your healthcare. Right? Just because you want to adopt to these newer things doesn't mean you want to give up on the things that are extremely important. So absolutely very close to our heart, and ElectricFlow has taken pride in this over 10 years, and this is really at the heart of it is the platform that I showed. It's apart from being extremely scalable and highly available, it has a very granular security access. Every single action can be controlled through access controls and permissions. It is enforced at the lowest level API. You know, there are one other thing that we also notice when it comes to security, and if you could really dive deep and look at some of the options out there for automation, is there's a perennial conversation that we get into around agent versus agentless, because that's one of the methods around doing the automation. And while ElectricFlow supports both agent and agentless option, frankly, the security conscious enterprises really prefer the agent-based option, because it allows to have that secured connection between the server and agent. For ElectricFlow, that is completely encrypted and anti-spoofing, such that once you have the agentry out there, no one other than the server that it is registered to will be able to automate actions through it. But the fact that agentless communications between server and the target require to open a SSH connections, really, when it comes down to security, that agent-based architecture really lends itself well for us. And there are many other things when it comes to security. That's a very larger conversation around ability to have zones and gateways, because when it comes to enterprises, distributed nature is the part of the DNA. And when you're taking actions from central servers to sites which are globally distributed, you really want to be really controlling the gateways that cross the data center lines. And having the notion like zones and gateways allows us to have a single port open that can be governed. Many of those things are just built in. So security and compliance things around drift tracking and all that, auditing every single thing, real-time tracking of every action on every resource with detail logged, always knowing what is deployed where. I mean, those are the bits and pieces that really make up some of those compliance guidelines, right? If you look at SOX, it's about encryption, it's about auditability, it's about knowing exactly what's going on. And really, ElectricFlow as a product is built for that security and compliance. Now, while needs for security, audit, and compliance have always been present, frankly, for any company, they probably are becoming more important, as I saw from your earlier slide, with the newer workloads like containers and microservices moving to clouds. Seems like you have also found some interesting data around container and microservices penetration and adoption.
Yeah.
Right, Torsten? Yeah.
Containers, everybody's favorite topic today, and they're not do everything, right? Even so, it typically is made to sound very close to that way. And via containers, our favorite topic, really, they just enable velocity on the side of the developer, right? The developer wraps the whole runtime into a container, and you can run it in your server environment, and that is certainly true. But security and compliance and cost control and a lot of the other things that were necessary before and that had already gaps before we even started talking about containers are now becoming much more pressing issues, right? We have almost 50% of organizations running containers in some form of a production environment, and that could, of course, mean it's a production environment for something of minor value, and it's still part of the experimentation process, but there's a lot of numbers backing up, like the 68% of enterprises evaluating containers today, and another 19 will do so in the next 12 months. There's a lot of numbers that show that containers are having a lot of traction, and they are something that everybody feels they need to evaluate, and to evaluate because the developers are asking for it and because they promise a lot more speed in the development process. So containers exist for, in the ideal world, they have microservices on them, multiple microservices, one microservice, or in reality, most organizations don't split their services into those small pieces. They host maybe sometimes even large applications on containers. But the point remains that containers are more short-lived than virtual machines. If deployed correctly, if the cluster is set up correctly, you can move them very quickly from point A to point B, from cloud A to the data center to cloud B, to wherever you believe the container should be living right now. And the container schedulers, of course, are very, very basic. It's like in the early days of OpenStack, where you did some round-robin scheduling, some very simple distribution based on how much RAM is available. But the policy the policy behind this is very, very basic and very, very rare. So you need a governance layer on top of container management to rein that in and to tie those to your business. And Anand, next question really to you is, how do you treat containers? How do you provide this governance and automation layer around containers so that people can be happy instead of scared of all of the security applications?
And that's a great point there. In fact, most of your findings are so close to what we also see. And, we absolutely, today, not going to get into the details of why containers are important. They are just providing a whole different way of delivering value to your customers. And we also see very, very similar to you. The trend is significantly towards increased container adoption. And before I get into how ElectricFlow handles it, in fact, I am planning to do a demo. Maybe this is also a good time for us to do another quick poll just to get feel for where everyone on this call is. So if you can run that next poll.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm launching it right now, and I think this one is going to be really, really interesting to see the results for. What is the nature of your applications currently? Select one of the following: traditional monolithic applications like .NET, Java, etc., microservices and containers only, or a hybrid of traditional and container-based applications. So go ahead and submit your answers, and we'll give you guys a couple seconds to get your answers in, and then we'll take a look at the poll results. While we are waiting, I would like to remind the audience that if you do have a question for either one of our panelists at any time, please feel free to use the control panel there and submit your questions. We're going to take a few minutes at the end of the webinar to go through your questions. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll now, and I'll push out the results here. Okay, there are the results. We're about 50% of you have traditional monolithic applications. Only 1% are using microservices and containers only. So, guys, sounds like maybe there's a little more work that needs to be done.
And what's the last, the hybrid?
The hybrid of traditional and container-based applications was a whopping 49%. So it doesn't look like pretty much anybody's gone all microservices and containers-based, but it looks like there is some migration happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, but that's very interesting. What do you think about that, Torsten?
Yeah, that number, the digital transition is a hybrid process, right? You have your legacy applications and you tag on additional services. You use stuff like API gateways. You just naturally extend it and turn it into something that becomes more and more a modern application and a a portable application. So it's not a surprise. The interesting piece is it's 50%, but how many of those 50%? How deep does it go? That is something that of course we can't capture with that poll.
No, and it's not at all surprising. It's a spot-on pulse on the market, actually, even with even everyone on this call today. We've been doing this poll for a while, and the number always is increasing, but what has remained constant is the hybrid nature. Because while containers show a lot of absolute promise, and there's a great way to have your applications run with all of the innovation that is coming in the container runtime world, it's still most of the applications that have been supporting your businesses are still your traditional applications like Java, .NET, and then mobile, mainframe. And most pragmatic enterprises are taking a kind of a phased approach towards it. Things such as what we realize is there's a lot of hybrid out there, right? They have the traditional apps. There is some microservices work going on the side, but most of it is hybrid, where existing monolith is being chipped away slowly. Every new feature is now based on containers, but most customers find themselves in a world where they need to manage applications of this mixed architecture. The process of delivery overall still remains the same, right? You still go through your dev, QA, pre-prod, prod, and what seems to be making this world even more interesting is all of the different container runtime platform options that are out there. So let me, instead of me talking and doing this, maybe this might be a good way to just spice things up and show you how ElectricFlow handles containers, and I'll try to keep it as quick as possible. Really, what ElectricFlow, and I mentioned this, what we have is a model-driven approach towards deployment automation. And what that really means is separating the what from the where, so that you could have the same application model be used to deploy to environments of any kind, really allow that abstraction. So, and that's the fundamental principle around application release automation, and that's really what we are doing, bringing the principles of application release automation to the container world, where you're able to model a container-only application, hybrid application where there is a mix of containers and microservices and a traditional component, or of course traditional application. What you see here is a kind of a storefront application where the purple boxes that you see are two microservices backed by Docker containers, and then there is a database tier which is local, which is physical, that is the traditional on-prem component. So this is a kind of an example of a hybrid application, and as a user, what all the customer user needs to do is define the details around where the container is, right? You come in here and define that my container image is sitting in this registry. This is the metadata around it. This is the version. This is the minimum CPU, minimum memory, volume mounts, what have you, right? The ports and load balancing things. Basically provide this as metadata, right? Just configuration. When you're doing this at this point, you're not worrying about, is this going to go to Kubernetes? Is this going to go to Amazon ECS or Mesosphere? It doesn't really, we try to abstract all of that. That way, as a user, you pretty much just define the configuration, and then once you have modeled your application, in this case, you have the two Docker containers, and then there is a traditional piece here with the database piece. All then you need to do is define the environment piece, right? This is the what, and then let me show you the where. The other angle around that is the environment. So while you define the application, then you can also define different environments. One other thing that we realize is portability is very important earlier in this, as people are still trying out whether Kubernetes works for them or Docker Enterprise works for them or OpenShift or Amazon ECS. There are still, people don't always have a provider selected and they stick with it. There is portability needed. And more importantly, there is so much of unique lingo each of these vendors have, right? Some call it tasks, some call it services, some call it pods. The APIs are different. And when you're trying to embark on this journey, apart from security, there's the sheer nature of rocket science as you try to go further is also one of the bottlenecks that we see as the adoption downstream is being looked at. It's, much of the adoption has stayed in the earlier dev world is because dev and QA, because, there is, people are able to get using their experts to do heavy scripting using some of the tools available. But when you look at doing the downstream, some of this modeling becomes important. And as ElectricFlow, we're trying to do our bit to remove the rocket science and bring portability. Now, talking about this, the environment pieces, as a user, you will just define where different environments. In this case, I have this environment that is backed by Amazon ECS. And again, like here, I'm not doing any APIs. All I'm saying is, this is how I connect to the environment. This is the cluster name that I want to be created in ECS. If the cluster doesn't exist, we will create the cluster. If it exists, we'll just add services to it. Again, bunch of other parameters that you give. And that's for Amazon ECS. Now, if you wanted to use, instead of Amazon ECS, Kubernetes or Azure Container Service, OpenShift, what have you, it's absolutely possible to do so. And we see, in fact, some of the use cases such as customers have using either Docker or Kubernetes in the lower order environments and then are standardizing on Azure or others in production. So that's what ElectricFlow really does. If I step back, what we're trying to do is bring this model-driven principle to containers so that you can handle hybrid applications in a portable way. To just show you a quick demonstration of this, while I showed you the authoring view, let's look at real quick what I'm showing you here is the Amazon ECS view where there are no clusters. What we will do is we'll quickly run this application deployment, and what I expect to see is the application deployment will end up creating the cluster automatically on Amazon deployed application, right? Just a quick demo of that. Much of these are larger conversations, so I'm just showing a quick demo all you'll do is click this button, select one of these options here, last run. Like I said, it's a feature-rich technology, but today I'm just going to hit the run. And now what you start seeing is real-time progress of all of that information. Now you mentioned about monitoring, you mentioned about visibility. Whenever everything is being done, Torsten, as Electric Cloud, ElectricFlow, you have all of that visibility at your fingertips all the time, right? So what we're doing here is that we are now provisioning the cluster. In Amazon, you can see that the cluster has been provisioned. Now it is going next, and it is trying to deploy the service, deploy the backend service, and all of that information is there. If you wanted to go detail and get even further details, all of the specific details around every single parameter and action is available, right? So that's what. Absolutely, from auditability perspective, yeah. And if I come back and do refresh here, I'm hoping that there you go, that it has now created a cluster and it has deployed 2 services. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes for the actual website to come up. What I'll do is later in the demo, when I come back, I will refresh this page for you. This is where we deployed our website to. But just to summarize, really what we're trying to do with containers is bring the principles of model-driven to containers. And now, while I showed you around the container deployment, where it really becomes very interesting is the path to production, manage the entire pipeline, and ElectricFlow allows people to build a pipeline to handle all of that. Today, I'm not getting into the details of that, though, right? So, yeah, I mean, that was about containers, but really what I also noticed earlier is in your research, you're also finding container as well as private cloud making a big comeback. Any reactions on the demo as well as the private cloud priority?
Yes, and the interesting thing is, and the reason why Electric Cloud was nominated for the EMA top 3 is basically you treat whether it's a private cloud, whether it's a container, whether it's serverless, we'll get to that later. You treat this all the same, right? You basically take away that hassle and those silos from the end user, and you give it a central abstraction layer. I mean, it reminds me of the days of Tosca, right, where we had application patterns that we were defining, and it's similar here, where I really abstract my code from my infrastructure. And I'll keep this very quick because the time is running out, I can see. So private cloud, that's one of the more surprising pieces for 2017, right? That was not in our predictions. Private cloud is really coming back, and it is a much bigger investment priority than expanding public cloud or even containers, right? It's an investment, it's an evaluation that's currently going on in a lot of enterprises that have noticed, oh wow, we can spend a hell of a lot of money on public cloud. If it's not governed, then we have a big problem. And tools that govern multiple clouds have just not broken through, right? It's not like everybody has those multi-cloud managers. They are, in fact, pretty rare still today. And then we have that lack of automation. So all of this together leads to even more need for a tool that ties it together in terms of reporting, automation, auditing, and all of those different elements. And there are really even more choices that you have to make today, right? In those private clouds, you could split them open even further into the different subtypes. But I think that's exactly what you're taking away as a hassle, as something to worry about for the DevOps group, for the operators, for basically everybody in the enterprise, right? You treat every deployment target equally. It doesn't matter if it's a private or public cloud, if it's on a container, if it's serverless.
Exactly, and Torsten, that is part of the core philosophy that we have embarked, which is, I call it model-driven principle. Fundamentally, it's really about abstracting away, and so whether it is now whether you're deploying to physical infrastructure with bare metal or static VMs, or you're deploying to public cloud, private cloud, or container runtime, or something else comes up tomorrow, having this abstraction layer allows us to do the decoupling, because the life of most of our customers is difficult as it is, and it is getting difficult every day with different choices coming. We want to make sure that our platform is able to cater to their changing world. And so when it comes to the dynamic cloud environments, public and private, we plug right into the clouds that you're already using. We got integrations with all of the leading technologies in the space, Amazon, Azure, Google, even OpenStack you mentioned, and of course in the same breath, likes of Chef and Puppet also come in. So yeah, you're spot on. It's really about, for us, is being that platform, helping customers manage their journey, and so that they can reuse what they have already built and don't have to throw away things, right? And what I also noticed in your earlier thing is, there is, as a double click, when it comes to the actual technologies, you're noticing something very interesting that I at least found interesting. What are you noticing around the different technology choices?
So yeah, it's interesting, but it's not, right? Microsoft has always been a little bit of its universe by itself. I've been part of that for a long, long time. So you have in Microsoft, you have your Visual Studio, right? And Microsoft is very clever in that way. They integrate Visual Studio with Azure so that you have more deployment targets. They make it very easy to push SQL Server databases and connect it to Azure resources. They make it very easy to, they have this new operations management system, right, that can truly manage Azure and local resources, which is pushing a little bit, where System Center into the gap the System Center used to fill or is still filling, but that's where Microsoft is going. So, and then you have that enterprise agreement, right, that where Microsoft is able to incentivize you to go and try the public cloud. So customers are very anxious to get this integrated, the Microsoft products integrated, and they're not so anxious. I mean, it's still not low numbers, but you look at Google, 35%, VMware, vSphere, 27%, AWS 24%. So they're less concerned about integrating Google, VMware, and Amazon, but they are very eager to integrate Azure and Anand.
Yeah. No. Okay. Now I get it. Yeah. So, and that actually resonates very much with many of the conversations that we are having too. Customers who have standardized on the Microsoft and ecosystem. You talked about Visual, the Visual Studio, the DFS ecosystem, as well as the VSTS. We have significant install base using that at the earlier part of their journey with their CI and with their source code management and their defect tracking, what have you. And then we have deep integrations. In fact, Microsoft is one of our partners in this space. We work with them directly. Azure, we are already on the Azure marketplace, and in fact, we are on the marketplace for others as well here. So I mean, we find that we do find that very regularly around Microsoft ecosystem, being able to really do that end-to-end story, pick up after the artifact has been published in TFS and really manage the further downstream. But if you step back, for us, architecturally, the way we have architected is independent of which the provider is, what the technology stack is. You should still be able to get the beauty. Now, while all this automation is absolutely driving many of the core business goals for faster time to market, increased quality, and all that, what we are really also realizing is the need for visibility, monitoring actions, and getting insights into how well are the DevOps initiatives doing, and am I doing better or worse? That whole idea around visibility and monitoring is what we are noticing in addition to the automation. What do you notice in your research around reporting, monitoring, Torsten?
There's a significant gap, right? And we see here some numbers. It is the number 2 priority right after cost. And of course, they are, those 2 variables are not independent ones. This lack of integration and monitoring tools actually leads to a higher cost, and cost being the number 1 problem that people are attacking. And then there is 37% saying they do not have a single pane of glass to monitor the DevOps pipeline. Now that number, while it's high for a research variable, right, it needs to be higher than that. from what we can see when we actually go into enterprises and have conversations with enterprises. There are deficiencies, but enterprises often, you talk to the guys in the silos, and they don't even know that they are in a silo, and they don't yet see it as a problem until they have bigger issues with the process and with the business guys who are complaining about their lack of transparency and their lack of ability to support them. So that's really that. It's a significant deficiency in terms of monitoring, and I think you had prepared a demo to show off your monitoring capabilities that you've added just very recently, right?
Absolutely, Torsten. So, there is such resurgent conversations that we are getting is automation has been if you look at the conversations that we were having, say, 12 months ago, it was more about automation, about reducing sample sizes, integrating the tool chain. All those are still there, but more and more what we are now realizing is help me map the value stream from my business matrix down to the bottom of automation, right? So that the analytics has become even more powerful to be able to really show all the investment that you're doing in your DevOps, how's that paying off. And with that, we have recently introduced DevOps Insight, which is a powerful analytics layer that provides really deep insight into the various aspects. So I'm going to do a quick demo again. And I do realize we are running a little short on time. All of these are very important topics, So let me just come back and make sure that our earlier demo, I just refreshed it, and there you go. Our website, beautiful green bike is there for you to drive along, right? So when now talking about monitoring, right, and monitoring visibility, that means different things. It is something like this where you have different views that show you the real-time progress of things. There is inventory view that will show you what is deployed where. But really, another thing that we recently introduced is this notion called dashboards and DevOps Insight, because customers really want to understand how well are they doing as far as their deployment throughput is concerned. How are they doing more deployments, more releases than before? Are they doing less? How many? The other vector that we see them think about is, are they being more successful or less successful? So the success and failure percentages really matter. Another thing that is extremely important is the time vector, the speed. That is always there. Like, am I doing things faster or slower? What are my durations? What are my bottlenecks in my software delivery process? Many of those questions are front and center when people start thinking about their data and information, and that's what ElectricFlow DevOps Insight really enables. You're able to judge all of that very quickly. You're able to get all these pretty graphics, but each of these widgets is telling a very important story. And then you can zero in if you wanted. You can slice and dice based on time, based on different applications, and based on environments. You can slice and dice. There is another thing around releases also. While that was around deployments, the broader releases that span multiple aspects of your pipeline, you could see that too. It will tell you, are you doing more automation, less automation? Are you increasing or decreasing? Is there a particular release that is taking the most time? And then if it is taking most time, are there specific tasks that are making most time so that you can zero in? So there is a lot of data available. In addition to that, what we also noticed recently is when it comes to managing the DevOps delivery pipeline, right? I talked about deployment statistics, release statistics. Another thing that is extremely important is as we do our DevOps delivery, there are different tools that play a role through the journey, right? On the left side, you got your ALM tools like your Jira, Rally, TFS, who are used for defect tracking user stories. You got your build tools like Jenkins. Some of them use us, TFS. You got your test automation tools, your unit test tools. So all of these tools are playing a role in when you look at a release. But when it comes down to the questions such as how well am I doing in terms of my release? Have I everything that I wanted to do, has that been planned? What's my dev success rate right now? How is my test success rate? Much of that information today we see with our customers exists, but that exists in these silos. And what they really, when they're trying to do is bring that all together, it becomes an exercise of manually querying things and a lot of Excel and what have you. So with Electric Cloud ElectricFlow 8.0, we have introduced this DevOps Release Command Center that gives you all of that at fingertips. You're able to see all the swim lanes around. Have I planned all of my user stories? How many of those have been resolved? How many are pending? What's the trend? Is it trending upward or downward? What's my build success rate? Basically gives you that bird's eye view. Then you can dig deeper, and you can do that for different releases. That was a release. There is probably a release that is doing better. So it just gives you that bird's eye view, right? And so that's a really quick way of answering it. But yeah, let's get back to our.
I'm a developer, man. I mean, this is terrible. I can't hide anything anymore now.
It's not about hiding. Exactly. It's not about really hiding. Yeah, exactly. You're right. You're right. Not about just making sure that the information is available, right? So let's move on to you talked about serverless, yet another priority, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and serverless, and the reason why I was talking about the hiding, I'm not talking about maliciously hiding, I'm more talking about there is a lot of things that you just do, right? And a lot of things that you think you get to later in terms of automation. And here you see the automation curve. I really like that. How much of the release is automated, right? How many of the stories are already complete? How many are already resolved? And usually you lag a little bit behind, and that may be okay, right? Because you don't have enough resources, or you have some great ideas later, or whatever. You violate the process, but it's now transparent that you violate the process, and that's really key. And the serverless functions piece is another thing, right? We have 11% that are currently using serverless function, and that doesn't sound like a lot. The reason why it's not a lot, the core reason why it's not a lot, is a lot of development groups are just not there yet, right? They haven't seen the potential. They're a little bit afraid. Their tools don't fully integrate with Lambda, with any of those platforms. But everybody's intrigued, and I'm convinced that there will be a lot more adoption, because the potential of just throwing out a function and trying this out. I talked in the beginning about a digital aggressor, right? A digital aggressor has to be able to make mistakes and to try out theories. And with something like a Lambda or IBM OpenWhisk or any of those technologies, you can do that, right? Serverless, without going into your service catalog and requesting a bunch of servers and talking to a bunch of people. Here, all you do is you just throw this function there. You don't even have to provision an EC2 server. You throw the function there and you run it, and you let your customers try it if you want to pay for that. But if nobody wants to try it because nobody cares about your features, you also don't pay, right? So you don't need a big PO to fill out a big approval request to be able to do that. And I assume that's just another layer, right? Another deployment target to you guys, where you will wrap around and govern it.
Absolutely, yeah. So for us, it's yet another deployment target, and pretty much handled by our integration. I did talk about plugins, so absolutely, yeah. So, wow, this was awesome. In interest of time, maybe, do we want to take a couple of, I'm just wondering, maybe you can summarize this, and then maybe we can take a few questions, if you don't. What do you think about that?
Yeah, let's take questions, because my summary is very briefly. It basically shows what our poll showed already before, and the numbers are surprisingly similar, actually, seeing that a much bigger base. And that's right. Remember that it's a hybrid world out there, right? You have to deal with all the different apps, and microservices will go up, containerized apps will go up, web apps and legacy apps will go down, but there will be probably a decade where we'll deal with all of them. So that's a key to keep in mind. Never go to and solve just a problem for one type of apps. So let's go to questions.
Okay, great. We're about 1 minute to the top of the hour, so I think we can slip one quick question in. The question is, I am already using Puppet, so how does this work for me? Does it mean I need to stop using Puppet?
Anand, that's yours.
Yeah, sure, Torsten. And probably this is, I mean, you can generalize that to configuration management, but if you're using Puppet, absolutely, it doesn't mean that you need to throw away what you're already doing. In fact, Puppet, we're working very closely with many of the configuration management players, Puppet, Chef, and really it comes down to ElectricFlow, or using all of your existing investment around infrastructure configuration and really bringing that into your application deployment and application delivery. We got out-of-the-box integrations with Puppet, and in fact with Puppet and ElectricFlow, that's a very, very strong story together. So no, absolutely, you can leverage all of the information that you already have there and do it.
And nobody wants to give up their beloved Puppet, right? I mean,
yeah.
One of those tools. There's a lot more like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. Well, I'm
maybe
sure that
we can take one more, maybe.
Well, it is the top of the hour. If we can answer it very, very quickly, then we can do it. Okay. So, are you able to handle deployments and releases for just microservices and containers, or monolithic applications?
Yeah, probably this came up before we talked about it, and yes, absolutely. Yeah. So my demo was about hybrid applications. Totally, that's really the punchline of this presentation, anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So we do have other audience questions that unfortunately we're not going to be able to get to, but I'm sure you guys will make yourselves available to get in touch with those folks on your own post-event. Please say yes. Don't make a liar out of me.
Oh, no.
Okay, great.
We will love to. Yeah, we'd love to, yeah.
All right, great. Well, then we are past the hour now, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out by thanking Anand and I'm sorry, I completely blanked there. Torsten, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to be quick here. Torsten and Anand, thank you both for being part of today's webinar. Check the DevOps.com website for future webinars. And also, as we said at the top of the hour, this website has been recorded and will be available shortly on the DevOps.com website, as will the slides. But thanks again for joining us today. And this is Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm signing off. Have a great day.
Thank you, Charlene.